The orbital station called Kethvora floated in the darkness of space like a metal beast that had swallowed 1,000 ships. And inside its rusted corridors walked creatures from 100 different worlds who came to trade, to steal, and to hide from whatever chased them across the stars. Marcus Cole was one of these creatures, though he looked nothing special compared to the aliens around him. He was just a human, a species that most of the galaxy considered young and weak and not worth remembering. He had served as a sergeant in Earth's military forces before they discharged him after a mission went wrong. And now he moved cargo from one station to another, earning just enough credits to keep his small ship running and food in his stomach. Today, he had delivered medical supplies to a dealer in the lower market. And now he walked through the crowded trading district with his payments secured in his jacket, thinking only about getting back to his ship and leaving this place behind. Market was loud and bright, with flashing signs in languages he could not read. And vendors shouted prices for goods both legal and illegal, while armed guards watched from elevated platforms with weapons ready. Marcus kept his head down and his hands visible because that was how you survived in places like this. You did not make trouble, and you did not get involved in other people's problems. That was the rule he lived by. And it had kept him alive for 3 years since leaving Earth. But then he heard the scream. It was not a human scream, but something higher and sharper, filled with fear and anger mixed together. And it came from an alley between two massive cargo containers. Marcus told himself to keep walking. This was not his business, and getting involved would only bring pain. His feet stopped anyway. He turned his head and looked down the alley. And what he saw made his blood run cold with a feeling he had not felt since his days as a soldier. 5 mercenaries stood in a half circle around a woman, though calling her a woman did not feel quite right. She was taller than Marcus by at least a head, with silver skin that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light, and markings on her face and arms that pulsed with soft blue light like stars. Trapped beneath her flesh, she was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at, like staring at something that did not belong in the dirty corners of a place like this. The mercenaries were Venchari, a reptilian species known for their cruelty and their willingness to do any job for the right price. And they moved toward her with weapons drawn and hungry looks in their yellow eyes. "Come quietly, Sovani," the leader hissed through sharp teeth. "And we might not break too many of your bones before we deliver you to House Veneth." The silver woman held a curved blade in her hands, a sword made of something that looked like crystal and metal combined, and glowing symbols ran along its edge like words written in light. She moved fast, faster than Marcus expected, and cut one mercenary across the arm before spinning to face another. But there were too many of them. One grabbed her from behind while another knocked the blade from her grip, and it clattered across the dirty ground and slid to a stop right at Marcus's feet. Time seemed to slow down as he looked at the weapon. It hummed with a strange energy he could feel through his boots, and the glowing symbols pulsed like a heartbeat. The woman's eyes met his across the distance, and in that moment he saw something that broke through every wall he had built around himself since leaving Earth. He saw someone who was about to lose everything, and he knew that feeling too well. Marcus reached down and picked up the sword. The moment his fingers touched the handle, something changed. The weapon vibrated in his grip, and the glow intensified until the whole alley was bathed in blue light. And a warmth spread up his arm and into his chest like fire that did not burn. The mercenaries froze and stared at him with expressions of shock and confusion. "That is impossible," one of them whispered. "Only Servani blood can wake a clan blade." Marcus did not understand what that meant, but he understood violence. And he understood that 5 armed killers stood between him and the door of his ship. He attacked. First mercenary fell before he could raise his weapon, the crystal blade cutting through his armor like it was made of paper. And Marcus was already moving to the next target before the body hit the ground. He did not think. Thinking was too slow for combat like this. And his body remembered training that his mind had tried to forget. The second mercenary managed to fire his weapon, but Marcus was not where the shot went. Ducking low and coming up inside the alien's guard to drive the blade through his chest. 3 left. They tried to coordinate, spreading out to surround him, but Marcus had fought worse odds in worse places. And the sword in his hand seemed to guide his movements like a partner in a deadly dance. He spun left and opened a throat, then reversed his grip and stabbed backward to catch the one trying to flank him, and when the leader turned to run, Marcus threw a piece of debris that knocked into the ground before closing the distance and ending the fight with a single strike. Silence fell over the alley. Marcus stood among the bodies with the glowing blade still in his hand, his breath coming hard and fast as the adrenaline slowly faded from his system. He looked at the sword, then at the silver woman who had pushed herself up against the wall and stared at him with eyes the color of moonlight, wide and filled with an emotion he could not name. "Here," he said, holding out the blade toward her. "This belongs to you." She did not take it. Instead, she continued to stare at him, and her glowing markings pulsed faster, and her hands trembled at her sides. "Human," she whispered in a voice that shook. "Do you understand what you have done?" Marcus frowned and looked at the sword, then back at her face, trying to read meaning in features that were beautiful but strange. "I helped you," he said slowly. "Those mercenaries were going to hurt you. Or worse." She shook her head and pushed herself away from the wall, taking a step toward him but keeping her distance. Taking a step toward him but keeping a step toward him, but keeping a step toward him, but keeping her distance. Like she was afraid to get too close. "You wielded my clan sword in my defense," she said. "You woke the soul steel with your touch when only my blood should be able to do so. I do not know what that means." "It means," she said, and her voice cracked with something between despair and disbelief, "that according to laws older than your species has existed. You are now bound to me." Marcus felt the warmth of the blade pulse against his palm, and a cold feeling settled in his stomach. Bound how? The silver woman closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, there was a weight in her gaze that pressed down on him like gravity. "You are my Volthair now," she said. "My sword husband, bonded to me and my bloodline until death separates us." The market continued its chaos around them, but Marcus heard nothing except the pounding of his own heart and the soft hum of the blade that had just changed his life forever. He had only wanted to help. Now he was married to an alien princess he had never met, hunted by enemies he did not know, and trapped by laws he did not understand. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a voice told him that this was what happened when you got involved in other people's problems. The voice, he decided, was absolutely right. The ship was small and fast, built for running rather than fighting, and it carried them away from Kethvora at speeds that pushed Marcus back into his seat until the station was nothing but a distant point of light. Kalith Sorvain sat across from him in the cockpit, her silver fingers moving over controls that made no sense to human eyes. And she had not spoken a word since they boarded her vessel and fled into the darkness between stars. Marcus watched her work and tried to understand what had happened in that alley. But every time he thought about it, his mind hit a wall that would not break. He had picked up a sword and saved a stranger. That was all he had done. And now this woman claimed he was her husband. "This is insane," he finally said, breaking the silence that had grown too heavy to carry. "I do not even know your name." "Kalith," she answered without looking at him. "Kalith Sorvain, last daughter of the Servani bloodline and heir to territories that once spanned 3 star systems." "Last daughter," Marcus repeated. "What happened to the others?" Her hands paused over the controls, and the glowing marks on her skin dimmed like embers losing their heat. "House Veneth happened," she said. They wanted our territories and our resources. And when my people refused to surrender them, Veneth hired armies to take them by force. She turned to face him then, and in her strange eyes he saw a grief so deep it made his own losses feel small. My mother died defending our homeworld. Keleth continued. My sisters were killed one by one over the years that followed, hunted down like animals so that no heir would remain to challenge Veneth's claim. And you are the last. I am the last, she confirmed. And now you are bound to my bloodline by laws that the Galactic Concord recognizes and enforces. Marcus ran his fingers through his hair and tried to think. But nothing about this situation made sense to him. Explain it to me, he said. Explain how picking up a sword makes me your husband. Keleth was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. And then she reached into a compartment beside her seat and pulled out the crystal blade that had started all of this trouble. This is not just a weapon, she said, holding it so that the light caught the glowing symbols along its edge. Among my people, a clan sword is a soul vessel. A what? When a Servani dies, a piece of their essence passes into the blade, she explained. Every ancestor who held this sword left part of themselves inside it. Their memories, their wisdom, their strength. Marcus looked at the weapon with new understanding, and a chill ran down his spine. You are telling me that thing is haunted. I am telling you it is alive, Keleth corrected. The soul steel chooses who may wield it. Only those of our blood should be able to wake its power. But you did something that has not happened in 10,000 years. I woke it. You woke it while defending me, she said. And according to the old laws, that act is called Voltharan, the sword bonding. It means you have declared yourself my eternal guardian, my protector, my partner in all things. Marcus felt the weight of her words settle on his shoulders like chains. I did not know, he said. I was just trying to help. I saw someone in trouble, and I acted. I believe you, Keleth replied, and her voice softened slightly. But the blade does not care about your intentions. It only sees the truth of what you did. Can it be undone? She shook her head slowly, and the last spark of hope in his chest flickered and died. The bond is permanent, she said, recognized by every government in the galaxy as a sacred and unbreakable union. To separate us now would require the agreement of the Remembrance Tribunal on my homeworld. Then let us go to them, Marcus said quickly. Let us explain what happened and ask them to release me. Keleth laughed. But there was no joy in the sound. The tribunal will not release you, she said. They will more likely execute you. Execute me? For what? For being a fraud, she answered. For pretending to be Voltharan without the soul to support the claim. The tribunal does not trust outsiders, especially not humans. Marcus felt anger rise in his chest. Hot and sharp. So I am trapped, he said. Trapped in a marriage I did not want with someone I do not know. And if I try to get out of it, I die. Yes, Keleth said simply. And what about you? He demanded. Are you happy about this? Being bound to a primitive human for the rest of your life? Her eyes flashed with something dangerous, and for a moment he thought she might strike him. Happy? She repeated. My entire species is nearly extinct. I am hunted by the most powerful house in the sector, and my sword has chosen a human as my bonded partner. No, I am not happy. They stared at each other across the small cockpit. Two strangers forced together by fate and ancient laws. And the tension between them was thick enough to cut. But before either could speak again, an alarm began to scream. Keleth spun back to her controls, and her fingers flew across the panels, pulling up displays that showed the space around them. No, she breathed. Not already. Marcus leaned forward to look at the screen, and his stomach dropped. A massive warship had appeared behind them, easily 10 times the size of their small vessel, and its hull was marked with a symbol he did not recognize, but Keleth clearly did. House Veneth. she said. "They have found us." Marcus looked at the warship, then at Keleth, then at the clan sword that rested between them. He had spent 3 years running from his past, drifting through space without purpose or direction. And part of him had welcomed the emptiness because it was easier than feeling anything at all. But now he was bound to this silver-skinned woman and her dying bloodline, hunted by enemies with more power than he could imagine. And there was nowhere left to run. The universe had given him something to fight for again, whether he wanted it or not. "Tell me what to do," he said. Keleth looked at him with surprise in her eyes, like she had expected him to panic or blame her or do anything except offer help. "You want to fight?" she asked. "I want to survive," Marcus replied. "And right now, surviving means working together." She held his gaze for a long moment, searching for something in his face. And whatever she found there made her nod slowly. "Take the helm," she said. "There's an asteroid field ahead called the Shattered Reach. If we can make it there, we might have a chance." Marcus moved to the pilot's seat and wrapped his hands around the controls, feeling the ship respond to his touch like an extension of his body behind them. The Veneth warship began to fire. The chase had begun. The Shattered Reach was a graveyard of broken worlds, a field of asteroids, and debris that stretched across millions of kilometers. Around a dying red star that pulsed with weak and angry lightships that entered. This place rarely came out again because the rocks moved in, patterns that no computer could fully predict, crashing into each other and splitting apart in explosions of dust and stone that could tear through a hull in seconds. Marcus flew straight into it. Behind him, the Veneth warship followed, its weapons firing beams of hot energy that turned asteroids into molten slag. And it was gaining on them with every passing moment. "They are too fast," Keleth shouted over the scream of alarms. "We cannot outrun them in open space." "Then we do not run in open space," Marcus replied. And he pushed the throttle forward until the engines howled with strain. The Wielded ship dove into the asteroid field like a bird diving into a storm. And immediately the world outside became chaos. Rocks the size of buildings tumbled past the viewport, some missing them by distances so small that Marcus could see the cracks in their surfaces. And the ship groaned and shook as he threw it through turns that should have been impossible. Keleth gripped the arms of her seat with silver fingers gone white at the knuckles. "This is madness," she gasped. "No pilot can navigate this. The reaction time required is beyond any known species, not beyond humans," Marcus said through clenched teeth. He was not thinking anymore. His body had taken over, guided by instincts that had been trained into him through years of combat flying in Earth's military. And his hands moved faster than his conscious mind could follow left to avoid a spinning rock, down to duck under a collision between two massive asteroids, barrel roll through a gap that appeared and vanished in less than a second. G-forces pressed him into his seat like a giant hand trying to crush him, and black spots danced at the edges of his vision. But he pushed through because stopping now meant death. Behind them, the Veneth warship tried to follow. It was bigger and faster in straight lines, but size was a disadvantage here. The warship had to weave around obstacles that Marcus could slip through, and its pilots were not human. Keleth watched the pursuit on her displays, and her eyes went wide with shock. "They are falling behind," she said. "How is this possible?" "Humans evolved on a planet with heavy gravity," Marcus explained between desperate maneuvers. "Our bodies can handle forces that would kill other species." He pulled the ship into a tight spiral around a tumbling asteroid, using its mass to hide them from enemy sensors for a precious few seconds. "We also have faster reaction times than most aliens I've met," he continued. "Something about how our brains process danger. I do not understand the science, but I know it works." A massive explosion bloomed behind them as one of the Veneth ship shots hit an asteroid that was blocking their path. and the shockwave shoved their small vessel forward like a toy thrown by an angry child. Marcus fought the controls and somehow kept them from smashing into a wall of rock that appeared in front of them. "This is insane," Calith repeated, but this time there was something different in her voice. Something that almost sounded like wonder. "Insanity is a human specialty," Marcus replied. And he almost smiled. They flew for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Deeper and deeper into the shattered reach, until finally the warship behind them gave up the chase and fell back to safer space. Marcus did not stop until they reached a small moon on the far side of the field. A dead rock with a thin atmosphere where they could land and hide and catch their breath. When the ship finally touched down and the engines went quiet, Marcus slumped in his seat and let out a breath he felt like he had been holding since the chase began. "We made it," he said. Calith unbuckled her harness and moved to kneel beside his seat, looking at him with those strange moonlight eyes that seemed to see more than they should. "You saved us," she said quietly. "No Servani pilot could have done what you just did." "It was just flying," Marcus replied, uncomfortable with her closeness and her attention. "It was not just flying," she corrected. "It was a display of skill that should not exist. The Veneth commanders will report what they saw today, and word will spread." She placed a silver hand on his arm, and the warmth of her touch surprised him. "You are not what I expected, Marcus Cole," she admitted. "When the blade chose you, I thought it had made a mistake. I thought I was cursed to be bound to a primitive creature who could never understand my world. And now? Now I think I may have judged your species too quickly." They stayed on the moon for 2 days while the ship's systems recovered and their wounds healed. And during that time, they talked at Keyleth, told him about her childhood on Servani Prime, about the gardens of crystal flowers that sang when the wind touched them, about her mother who had been a warrior and a poet and a queen. She told him about watching her world burn and running through the stars with nothing but her clan sword and her name. Hunted by enemies she could not fight alone. Marcus told her about Earth, about the blue oceans and green forests that covered his homeworld, about the wars that humans fought among themselves because they had not yet learned to stop. He told her about his squad and the mission that went wrong, about the friends he lost and the guilt he carried, about the years of drifting that followed because he did not know how to live with what had happened. When he finished speaking, Calith was quiet for a long moment. "You carry much pain," she said finally. "So do you. Perhaps that is why the blade chose you," she offered. "Perhaps it saw something in your soul that matched mine." Marcus did not know what to say to that. So he said nothing, but something had changed between them. The anger and resentment had faded, replaced by something gentler. Something that felt like the beginning of understanding. On the 3rd day, as they prepared to leave, Calith told him the truth about what waited ahead. "The Remembrance Tribunal is our only hope," she explained. "If they accept our bond and recognize my claim, House Veneth will lose their legal hold on my territories and the assassination contracts will be cancelled. But you said they would execute me. They will test you first," she said. "The Volkith Wrath, the Trial of Flames. You will have to fight while bonded to the clan sword, and if your soul is false, the blade will kill you." Marcus felt fear curl in his stomach, cold and familiar. "And if I pass?" "Then we will be truly bound," Calith answered. "And no force in the galaxy will be able to separate us." She met his eyes, and in her gaze he saw hope and fear and something else he could not name. "The trial will require you to be willing to die for me," she said. "Not just pretend, not just fight. You must truly accept death in my defense, or the blade will know." Marcus thought about everything he had lost and everything he had been running from. And he thought about this silver woman who was the last of her kind. "Then I guess," he said slowly, "we had better make sure I am ready." Calith smiled for the first time since he had met her. and it transformed her face into something so beautiful it stole his breath. They left the moon behind and set course for Servani Prime. The trial was waiting. Servani Prime had been beautiful once. A world of crystal mountains and silver forests where the Servani people had built cities that touched the sky. But now it was a conquered place. Controlled by House Veneth and stripped of everything that had made it special, Marcus and Calith arrived in disguise. Smuggled onto the planet by contacts that Calith had kept hidden for years. And they made their way through streets patrolled by Veneth soldiers to the holy city of Ethrin, where the Remembrance Tribunal waited. Tribunal was held in a cathedral made entirely of crystal, a building so old that it had stood for 100,000 years. And even House Veneth did not dare destroy it because the Galactic Concord protected places of such ancient power inside the cathedral. Hundreds of beings had gathered to witness the proceedings. Servani survivors who had hidden across the galaxy, observers from the Concord, and representatives of House Veneth who had come to ensure their interests were protected. The center of the Great Hall sat three ancient Servani. Their silver skin faded to pale gray, and their bioluminescent markings barely visible. But their eyes still held the weight of generations. These were the High Arbiters, the last keepers of Servani law. And they would decide whether Calith's claim was valid and whether Marcus was worthy of the bond he had accidentally created. Calith stepped forward first, holding her clan sword high so all could see. "I am Calith Servain," she declared. "Last daughter of the Servain bloodline, heir to the territory stolen by House Veneth. I come before this tribunal to claim what is mine by blood and by right." The gathered crowd murmured, and Marcus could feel the weight of their eyes turning toward him. From the shadows at the edge of the hall stepped a tall figure in armor of black and gold. This was Lord Draven Veneth, head of the house that had destroyed Calith's people, and his eyes burned with cold hatred as he looked at her. "The tribunal recognizes your claim," Draven said smoothly, "but we challenge the validity of your bond." He pointed one armored finger at Marcus. "This creature is human," he continued, "a species barely capable of walking upright. The suggestion that a clan sword chose him as Volfarin is an insult to everything the Servani once were." The High Arbiters exchanged glances, and the oldest of them spoke in a voice like wind through crystal. "The challenge is heard," she said. "Let the human face the Volkith wrath. Let the blade judge the truth of his soul." Guards led Marcus to the center of the hall, where a circle had been carved into the crystal floor, and Calith placed her clan sword in his hands with fingers that trembled. "Remember what I told you," she whispered. "The blade will know if you hold back. You must be willing to die." Marcus looked into her eyes and saw fear there, fear for him. And he realized that somewhere during their journey she had begun to care whether he lived or died. "I will not let you down," he promised. A door at the far end of the hall opened, and Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. The champion that House Veneth had chosen was not Benshari or any species Marcus had seen before. It was a Krethel, a massive reptilian creature that stood nearly 3 meters tall, with scales like armor plates and arms thick as tree trunks. But that was not the worst part. Creature had been modified with cybernetic enhancements. Metal plates fused to its skull and blades built into its forearms, and its eyes glowed with the red light of combat programming. "This is your champion?" Marcus asked, keeping his voice steady even though every instinct screamed at him to run. "The laws allow any warrior of the challenging house to serve," Draven replied with a smile that showed too many teeth. "And Grathkal has served House Veneth faithfully for many years." The monster stepped into the circle and let out a roar that shook the crystal walls of the cathedral. Marcus raised the clan sword and felt its warmth pulse through his grip. And he understood that this was the moment everything depended on. The fight began. Grathkal was fast for something so large. crossing the distance between them in 2 massive strides and bringing a cybernetic blade down in an arc that would have split. Marcus in half Marcus dove aside and rolled to his feet, slashing at the creature's leg as he passed. But his blade barely scratched the armored scales. The monster swung again, and Marcus blocked. But the force of the blow sent him flying backward across the circle, and he tasted blood as he hit the crystal floor pane exploded through his body. In his ribs where something had cracked, in his arm where the sword had twisted in his grip. But he forced himself to stand. The audience watched in silence as the human faced a towering monster. And Marcus could feel their doubt like a physical pressure. They expected him to fail, to die, to prove that humans were exactly what everyone believed them to be. Weak and primitive and unworthy Marcus, attacked, could not match the creature's strength or its armor. But he was faster and smaller, and he used every trick he had learned in a lifetime of fighting to stay alive. He ducked under swings that would have taken his head, rolled between the monster's legs to strike at joints where the scales were thinner, retreated and advanced and retreated again in a dance of survival. The clan sword glowed brighter with each passing moment, its light matching the rhythm of Marcus's heartbeat. And he began to understand what Keleth had meant about the blade judging him. It was not looking for skill or strength. It was looking for something deeper. Grathcall caught him with a backhand blow that sent him crashing to the floor. And before Marcus could rise, a massive foot pinned him down. Pathetic. The monster growled through speakers built into its throat. Die knowing you failed her. The cybernetic blade rose for the killing strike. Marcus looked past the monster to where Keleth stood at the edge of the circle, her hands pressed to her mouth and her eyes bright with tears. And in that moment he made his choice. He did not want to die. But he would die for her. He would die to give her a chance at reclaiming what she had lost, to let her bloodline continue, to ensure that her enemies did not win. The blade in his hand blazed with light so bright it blinded everyone in the cathedral. And Marcus felt strength pour into his broken body from somewhere beyond himself. He caught the descending blade with his bare hand, the clan sword's power protecting his flesh. And with a scream of effort he twisted free and drove his weapon up into the one gap in Grathcall's armor. The monster staggered and fell. Silence filled the cathedral as Marcus stood over the fallen champion, his body broken but still standing, the clan sword burning in his grip with light that matched the marks on Keleth's skin. The High Arbiter rose from her seat. The blade has spoken, she announced, and her voice carried to every corner of the hall. The bond is true. The audience erupted in chaos, voices shouting in shock and disbelief. But Marcus heard none of it, only saw Keleth running toward him, catching him as his legs finally gave out, holding him against her as the light of the sword slowly faded. You did it, she whispered against his hair. You impossible, wonderful human. You did it. Marcus tried to speak, but darkness was pulling at the edges of his vision. The last thing he saw before unconsciousness took him was her face, her beautiful silver face, looking at him like he was something precious, like he was something worth keeping. Marcus woke in a room of crystal and light, lying on a bed softer than anything he had ever felt. And for a long moment, he did not know where he was or how he had gotten there. Then the memories returned. The cathedral, the monster, the blade burning in his hand with power that should not have been his to command. He tried to sit up and gasped as pain shot through his body, reminding him of every wound he had taken in that desperate fight. Do not move too quickly, a familiar voice said. Your bones are still mending. Keleth sat in a chair beside his bed, and she looked different than she had before. The fear and tension that had marked her features since the moment they met had faded, replaced by something that looked almost like peace. How long? Marcus managed to ask. 3 days, she replied. The healers said you should have died from your injuries. They do not understand how a human body can take so much damage and continue to function. Stubbornness, Marcus said with a weak smile. It is a human specialty. Calith leaned forward and placed her silver hand over his, and the warmth of her touch spread through him like medicine. The tribunal's ruling has sent shock waves across the sector. She told him. House Veneth's assassination contracts have been cancelled. Their legal claim to my territories has been rejected, and Lord Draven has been forced to retreat in disgrace. Marcus closed his eyes and let the news wash over him. So you won, he said. We won, Calith corrected gently. None of this would have been possible without you. She helped him sit up slowly, adjusting pillows behind his back, and through the window of the room he could see a city spread out below them. Not the occupied streets of Etherin, but somewhere else, somewhere that felt older and more sacred. Where are we? My ancestral home, Calith answered. The Sorvain family estate, returned to me by order of the tribunal. I brought you here to recover. Marcus looked around the room and saw objects that spoke of generations. Paintings on the walls showing silver-skinned figures in formal poses. Weapons displayed in cases that glowed with protective fields, and on a stand beside the window. The clan sword that had changed everything. There is something else, Calith continued, and her voice grew softer. Word of your victory has spread beyond Servani space. Ambassadors and intelligence officers across the galaxy are asking questions about humanity. What kind of questions? They want to know how a species so young could produce a warrior capable of passing the trial of flames, she said. They are updating their assessments. Your people are no longer classified as primitive or weak. Marcus thought about Earth and the billions of humans who live there, unaware that one man's desperate fight in an alien cathedral had changed how the galaxy saw them. I did not do it for humanity, he admitted. I did it for you. Calith's glowing marks pulsed brighter, and she looked away for a moment before speaking again. Marcus, there is something I need to say to you. She stood and moved to the window, looking out at the city that was now hers again, and when she turned back, her eyes held an emotion he had never seen in them before. When the blade chose you, I was angry, she said. I thought fate was playing a cruel joke on me, binding me to an alien who could never understand my people or my pain. She walked back to his bedside and knelt so that their faces were level. But I was wrong. She continued. You fought for me when you did not have to. You stayed with me when you could have run. And you faced death rather than let my enemies win. I have never known anyone, Savani or otherwise, who would do what you did. Marcus felt his heart beating faster, and he was suddenly very aware of how close she was. Calith, I did not know what I was getting into when I picked up that sword, he said. I did not choose this bond any more than you did. I know, she replied. That is why I want to give you a choice now. She reached for the clan sword and brought it to him. Placing it in his hands, the tribunal has declared our bond valid. But that is a political and spiritual matter, she explained. I will not force you into the personal aspects of what it means to be Voltharan. If you wish, you can be my guardian in name only, a partner in alliance, but nothing more. The sword hummed in Marcus's grip, warm and familiar now, like an old friend welcoming him home. You would let me go? He asked. I would let you choose, Calith corrected. You have earned that right. Marcus looked at the blade, then at the silver woman kneeling before him, and he thought about everything he had been through since leaving Earth. He had spent 3 years drifting through space without purpose, running from his past because he did not know how to live with what he had lost. And somewhere along the way he had stopped believing that he deserved anything better, but this woman had shown him something different. She had shown him that even broken things could fight, that even the last of a dying bloodline could stand against an empire, that even a man who had lost everything could find something worth protecting. I did not choose this bond, Marcus said slowly, but I am choosing now. He met her moonlight eyes and saw hope and fear and something deeper waiting there. I have been drifting since I left Earth, Keleth. No mission, no purpose, no reason to keep going, except that I was too stubborn to stop. But you gave me something to fight for. He reached out and took her hand with his free one. If you will have me, he said, I will stay. Not because the blade says I have to, not because the laws demand it, but because I want to. Because I cannot imagine going back to the emptiness of what I was before. Callous markings blazed with light, the Cervani expression of deep emotion. And she leaned forward to press her forehead against his in a gesture that felt more intimate than any human kiss. Then stay. Marcus Cole, she whispered. Stay and let us see what a human sword husband can become. Outside the window, the sun was setting over a world that had been reclaimed. Painting the crystal towers in shades of gold and pink and deep purple, Marcus held the woman who was now his wife. Truly his wife by choice as well as by fate. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be, but far across the galaxy, in the obsidian halls of House Veneth. Lord Draven watched recordings of the trial of flames. He watched the human fight with a ferocity that defied everything he thought he knew. About the species, he watched the clan sword blaze with light in alien hands, and slowly, Draven began to smile. Forget the Cervani girl, he murmured to the spy who stood at his shoulder. She is a problem for another day. But that human, that creature who should have died a dozen times and refused to fall, he leaned forward in his throne, red eyes gleaming with new interest. I want to know everything about him, Draven continued. About his species. About what makes humans different from every other race in this galaxy. The spy bowed and vanished into the shadows to begin his work. Lord Draven turned back to the recording, watching Marcus stand triumphant over his fallen champion. And his smile grew wider. The hunt was only beginning.